Welcome to Plain Talk. Busy legislative session still going on. And one of the things we've been talking about a lot this session is criminal justice reform. And believe it or not all the criminal justice reform that's taking place or that's on the table in Bismarck is Attorney General Drew Wrigley's bill. I have a column up about that. We're not going to talk about our guest. Talk to our guest about that. That's a separate proposal. But it's a series of bills, and I'm not sure it's gotten the attention it should because, again, I don't know how many times we see really consequential policy just kind of fly under the radar. And then it gets implemented and it works really well and it's a success story. And kind of nobody really knows it happened. I shouldn't say that. I think people notice the impact. People notice the change. I don't think they really understand how it happened. And part of it does frustrate me because a lot of what we talk about in politics are the stupid things that they're doing, or the things that don't work, or the failures, or the fraud, or the abuse. Those are the things that get a lot of attention. We don't focus a lot of the attention on, gosh, we're making really good progress on some really good reform. And there's a slate of bills. It's backed by Governor Kelly Armstrong's administration. Lieutenant Governor Strinden is obviously a big supporter as well. It's House Bill 1425 is the first of them. It's related to why? And now I just completely lost. Diversion programs. I'm sorry. I completely lost. I thought I was going to be able to click to my notes fast enough to catch up to my mouth, but it's diversion programs. House Bill 1417 is related to parole and probation violations. House Bill 1549 is related to housing and things like that. They're good bills. And here to talk with us about them is Jonathan Holth, who has been, I don't want to say elevated. You were part of the Governor Burgum's administration. But you're in the cabinet now for Governor Armstrong. And you've got a position of, and again, I hate all these buzz terms. What's your title?
You guys butchered it on the lead-in last week. So if you want, so my title is Commissioner of Recovery and Reentry.
Okay. You're lucky we're pronouncing your name right. And
yeah,
I'll take it.
Yeah, Johnny Holth.
I'll take it. I knew I'd have the opportunity to say it today, so I didn't call or text you guys after I heard it last week.
So tell us a little bit about these bills. What are we trying to accomplish?
Yeah. So, I'll just start, with you talking about my position. The governor, when he was elected, reentry and behavioral health are priorities of his, and he said that in his State of the State address which is when he announced my position. And part of that is just working across the state to see what opportunities we have. So as you mentioned, there's a slate of 3 bills, House Bill 1425, 1417, and 1549, that really are the result of 2 years of work. In the last legislative session, there was a resolution that came through saying, hey, we've got some issues here that we need to study. And over the course of the interim, a diverse group of stakeholders, 15 stakeholders on a working group chaired by then Representative Strinden, now Lieutenant Governor Strinden, really looked at what issues we have within our system and ways that we could help. If you look at the numbers, just in terms of our prison population in the state, when the U.S. prison population declined between 2011 and 2021 by about 25%, ours in the state increased by 18%. And when you really look closely at that and break down sort of why that happened, the bulk, I would say, of those admissions, the increase in admissions is technical violations from people that are on probation, or clear instances where someone is struggling with substance use disorder and may have could have had some help to alleviate that. So the three slate of bills are a result of that group studying for over the course of a year all the different entry points into the criminal justice system, and there are a lot of them. They came up with 26 recommendations and sort of put those into 5 buckets, and then those buckets got developed into bills. So 1425 sort of looks at the front end. Rob, you mentioned, talks about a pilot program for 3 different counties to look at diversion. It also talks about deflection, so ways that our law enforcement can get involved before someone even enters the criminal justice system. So that
Define those real quick. Diversion and deflection for people who aren't
yeah.
familiar.
So deflection, think about deflection as, a law enforcement official comes across somebody who might be having a mental health episode, for example, and, someone may be trespassed and they hadn't taken their medications. The officer, which by the way, our law enforcement officials use this discretion every day. But this would sort of codify what that deflection process is. It allows our law enforcement officers to say, instead of taking someone to jail when that happens, they can assess the situation and bring them to a treatment center to get evaluated, or get them to a place where they can get the help that they need. So deflection, would be before someone even enters the justice system at all. There's no charges, anything like that. Diversion is, when someone is in the system, so they may have been charged or may have been arrested, and it gives the prosecution the ability to do essentially the same thing, to say, hey, this person really needs services, right? So rather than continue on this path of bringing them through all the stages of the criminal justice system, let's identify what this person's needs are, and get them the help that they need. So that's kind of diversion and deflection, the definitions of those.
So,
Oh, go ahead, Chad.
no, you go ahead. Keep talking about the two other bills.
Yeah. So, 1425 looks at sort of the front end, like we were talking about. 1417 really looks at, as you mentioned, Rob, probation and parole, and when someone has been in the criminal justice system, are there ways that we can look closely at making sure that they're set up for success? So it looks at technical violations. It looks at sort of tiered looks at those technical violations and how that might adversely affect someone. Again, when we're looking at the rising prison population in North Dakota and the data over the past few years, a large number of people incarcerated are there because of technical violations. So looking closely at that, and also looking at fees, that's a big part of this. As this group looked at the data, it looked at the $55 a month supervision fee that someone pays when they're on probation. First of all, does that set someone up for failure if people are struggling to have employment already, and they can't come up with that money? Secondly, are we really gaining anything from that? If you look at what the state was actually able to collect from those fees versus what they weren't able to collect versus the time that they actually spent trying to collect those fees, it's really a wash. I mean, if you look at the fees that weren't collected, but then you look at the time spent trying to collect them, it's really not worth it. There's no gain that we're getting from those. So really looking at those fees, and then it also includes just the ability for us to continue to study fees across the board in our system to see what's beneficial and what's not. So that's really looking at the middle one, and then 1549 is looking at the back end. So as someone is preparing to leave incarceration, enter back into society, are they set up for success? So Rob, you mentioned housing. So, this would provide for a task force to really look at housing. I can tell you guys, since I've taken this job, I've been meeting with people that are in this, that work in this space across the state, whether it's state's attorneys, judges, treatment providers. Every single meeting that I've had, housing has come up as a barrier for people that are trying to get back on their feet. So it looks at that. Simple things like making sure that we are collaborating across agencies to make sure that when someone leaves incarceration, that they have a state issued ID so that they can get housing and employment, that they have proper medical care before they leave jail or prison, to make sure that they're set up for success as they leave. So it's really the three of them together are a comprehensive look at sort of the front end, the middle, and the back end, and are the result of really studying this for over a year and a half to try to alleviate our prison population, which we know is growing, which we know costs money, but also to make sure that people are set up for success, because we know that 95% of people in jail and prison are going to be returning to society to become our neighbors again.
So Jonathan, in your previous role in the Burgum administration was, I believe, I'm going to screw up a title, but Director of Recovery Reinvented.
Yep.
Can you talk a little bit about how addiction and recovery fits into all of this stuff? I mean, I talked to a police officer the other day who said, and I don't know if this is true, but 80 to 85% of the stuff he deals with are alcohol or drugs are somehow involved. So where does recovery fit into all of this, if we're going to make sure that people can be part of society and be, citizens like we want them to be?
Yeah, it's a good question, Chad, and it's the simple answer is it's a massive part of it, and the two are really intertwined. I've done ride-alongs with the police department in my hometown. The last one I did was the 10 p.m. to 3 a.m. shift, and I will tell you that every single call that we were on, not 80% of them, every single one of them involved drugs and alcohol. If you look at the data that was collected during this work group's work, 21% of North Dakotans would qualify for substance use disorder, and which is higher than the national average, right? So, they're intertwined, which I think Governor Armstrong, to his credit, when he created this position, my position, and appointed me to it, it's why it's recovery and reentry, knowing that the two are completely intertwined. But again, when we talk about a rising prison population and we look at why that is, a large percentage of that is because of drug and alcohol problems that people have, that if we provided more opportunities for them to address that, then we're solving a lot of problems in the state.
It seems you've mentioned the rising prison population a few times, and I think that might come as a surprise to some people because the narrative is that North Dakota is soft on crime. And so the idea of putting so many people, that our prison population has been rising so quickly, I think is maybe surprising. What about the people who would say that we're already too soft on crime, and doing some of this stuff is just going to make crime rates worse? Like we're not being as tough with them as we should be. Therefore, they're going to go back out into society and they're going to reoffend.
Yeah, I think first of all, we need to separate when we're talking about violent crimes versus what, the people that we're ultimately, looking at with these three bills, right? I mean, these three bills we're not talking about violent criminals with these three. So I think that there needs to be a delineation between those two. I would also say this. I mean, if we look at recidivism rates and we look at reoffending and higher crime rates, I would argue that a lot of time that is because we haven't set those people up for success when they're getting ready to reenter society in the first place. So, there's, and I say this, this work group was assisted by the Crime and Justice Institute, which is a nonpartisan group that has done this across the country. These are what we're talking about in these bills are best practices that have worked well in other parts of the country here. We're not coming up with something completely new. Now it's obviously tailored to North Dakota's population, but we have plenty of data that shows when we help people and ultimately keep them out of the system, the longer that they're in the system, and if they reoffend once and twice, the harder it is for them to get out of the system. So I think these things in these bills, these are small investments that can make a world of difference in what we're trying to accomplish in North Dakota.
Jonathan, when you were with Recovery Reinvented, you and I had several conversations about, that job was about sort of raising the profile and making people aware of addiction, those kind of things, and less so on the policy side of things. Now, here you are, 3 months into your this job during a legislative session. You're jumping right into policy and trying to solve some really big problems in a weird political environment, quite frankly, where people aren't necessarily seeing eye to eye. What are you learning? What are you surprised by? What are you liking about the job and trying to fix these complex issues?
Yeah, I think, I give a lot of credit to the Governor Burgum and First Lady Burgum for changing the conversation around substance use disorder and addiction in the state. And I think that frankly had to be done before we can tackle some of these issues. So, when meeting with Governor Armstrong, he said, like, let's stand on the shoulders of giants here and take this to the next level. Right. And that's what we really want to do. So what am I learning? I'm learning that, first of all, I really like it. I really like being involved on the policy level. It's been enjoyable. It's fascinating. I've also learned that we have a lot of really good people doing really good work in the state that want to do more good work. I've seen that every day. We have a lot more myth busting left to do, right? I mean, there's still a lot of misunderstanding around these topics. And I'm not talking about the legislature. I'm talking about in our general population around the state. So that needs to continue. Um, but but I think we are in a unique position in North Dakota because we've changed the conversation here about it to really make some differences in the coming years, to really um, to bolster services. We do services really, really effectively in this state. So I think we're really uniquely positioned to flip some of that data that was alarming coming out of that last interim.
I agree. And this does seem like the logical next step, right? I mean, step one is identifying that there's a problem. Step two is let's do some stuff about
Right.
not that we weren't doing things previously, but let's be intentional about this. You said myth busting. What are some of the myths that the public still has that need to be busted?
Uh, I think, you touched on it a little bit earlier, Rob, when when we're talking about, I think one of the things when we talk about crime, we put everybody in the same bucket, right? And I think being really clear and intentional um, about how we're addressing different people that have different needs is one thing. So, somebody that's convicted of aggravated assault is not does not have the same set of issues that someone who is suffering from substance use disorder that, like I mentioned earlier, might have not taken their medication and stumbled into, someone's backyard when they shouldn't have. So I think looking really clearly at the different levels of offenses is really, really important, and not assuming that everybody who enters the system is the same is really, really important.
How
I
do you?
also just, oh, go
Sorry.
ahead.
No, go ahead. I want to go ahead and finish.
Yeah, and I also just think, when we did a lot of work in the Brigham administration on stigma and just how people talk about this. And, as we take the next level and develop this into policy, we also can't forget of the importance of continuing that stigma work, right? So lifting voices up that can tell powerful stories about how they've overcome, about how this impacts families, because we still have a long way to go. I mean, and I'm a person in recovery. I still see that every day, right? It's still very uncomfortable for some people to talk about. There's still, a lot of people that, too many people that believe that this is 100% a choice and it's not a disorder that's been defined by the CDC, so I think continuing to focus on that. We've seen how it changes how people look at this and how they treat it when they understand that it's a disease.
Walk me through how we draw some of the lines between the types. I mean, some of it's clear cut, right? Like if it's just somebody who was busted for possession because they have an addiction problem, that's pretty clear cut. Or maybe somebody who's having a mental health episode and they trespass, that's pretty clear cut. But what about
Yeah.
somebody who does like some significant property damage
Yeah.
because driving drunk or they did something stupid while they were high, or somebody who hurts somebody else?
Mhm.
I think we could argue there is a difference because the intent is maybe not there. Uh,
Sure.
but there's still property damage. Somebody was in,
Yeah.
so it's got to be hard to draw some of those lines. And I'm saying this completely agreeing. Like I want to draw the lines and I want to, but it gets pretty gray in some of these areas.
It does. It does. And I think that, so all three of these bills, passed the House and are now on the Senate side, working their way through, Senate Judiciary. We had a hearing the other day, and I know they're doing committee work on it even today as we speak. And I think that, there will be some amendments, I'm sure. But I think to your point, um, that will probably be addressed in some final versions of these bills, because I think it's important to note that, um, the criminal justice system in the state of North Dakota is about accountability and holding people accountable. These bills don't change that. There's nothing in these bills that say we should hold people less accountable. And again, like I mentioned too, they're not meant for violent criminals. We still we're not talking about that group of people. I do think again though that, to your point, Rob, law enforcement officials and prosecutors and judges are people that can make those decisions and can see that, and we do need to hold people accountable. And this is still, at the end of the day, these three bills are about public safety. They're about health and well-being, and we want that too. So that's important to us. And I think But I also think why this is we're talking about in 1425 specifically with diversion and deflection, we're talking about a pilot program, that we'll try this out in 3 counties, and we'll report back to legislative management on what worked and what didn't, and we'll probably adjust in the next legislative session. So I think we're learning, and that will come out of this too.
So, Jonathan, it feels like this session is very much, sort of a black and white. Either you want to lock everybody up or else you're soft on crime. And I think your answer just there was very, very clear that there's still accountability here. What I know about your past career is you have the ability to get along with folks, to bring people together. Do you think once we get to May 1st, I mean, your job's probably just starting on May 1st, right? I mean, to implement all this kind of stuff. Do you think we have the ability, sort of as a state legislature, as elected officials, as prosecutors, as cops, as citizens, to sort of come together after this session and figure out what this looks like moving forward? Because everybody involved in this wants to have safe communities. Everybody involved in this doesn't want to spend endless amount of tax dollars locking people up, right? I mean, I think we all have shared interests in this, but how do we get to that point? So, I mean, as you're thinking long term, do you see a path where everybody can sort of come together, get on the same page, and move forward?
Well, everybody, I don't know about everybody, but
You set the bar high, Chad.
That's fair.
Jonathan, do you think you could get everybody to agree with you?
Right. That's
in this political environment, 100% of people to all agree on a policy, Jonathan. Why not?
The short answer to your question, Chad, though, is I do. I do believe that, that there is a way to do that. And I do believe that consensus can be built. And that's done a number of different ways. First of all, it's done by including everybody in the discussion, right? I talked about the diverse group of stakeholders that developed these bills. Not included in that 15 was, a series of 40 different agencies that they interviewed about these in the meantime too, right? And that also includes being willing to have conversations with people that you completely disagree with on this topic and trying to find common ground. So I do believe in that. I can tell you I'm committed to that. I believe the governor's office is committed to that. So that will be the plan and the goal moving forward on May 1.
What is
I'm going to jump in again here. So Kelly, the governor's made this a priority. Why? Why has Kelly made this a priority?
I think because Kelly understands the things that this group found in their work, and that's we have a rising prison population. We have to do something about that unless we want to keep building more prisons at really expensive rates over the next few years. I also think because of Kelly's background, he understands substance use disorder and mental health challenges. He talked about his grandma and the State of the State address, right?
Grandma Mert.
Yep. But he also, in his profession, his clients, when he was a criminal defense attorney, were the people that we're talking about here, that needed opportunities to better themselves. And so I think he has a comprehensive understanding of what these bills, if passed, can do for alleviating those issues.
Jonathan, what does your job look like? And I'm assuming these bills are going to pass. I'm looking back at the log on the legislative website, and I mean, they all passed the House by wide margins, obviously.
Yeah.
That's no guarantee of success in the Senate.
I was going to say, in this legislature, run through the finish.
1417 got a due pass out of judiciary this morning. The other two haven't been heard yet. So, yeah.
Okay. What I'm saying is the prognosis looks pretty good.
Yeah.
But so assuming you're going to have these 3 bills, what is your job starting May 1st? I mean, what does your job look like from then on to get this stuff implemented?
Sure. Kelly described my role when he appointed me as really wanting to operationalize the relationship between the state, local governments, and providers that are working in this space. So, I'll sort of live in between and work with DOCR, DHHS, the governor's office, and then private providers from across the state. So, you heard me mention earlier, I've been taking a lot of meetings with state's attorneys and judges from across the state to make sure that at the county and local levels, that they're also getting the support from the state that they need, and that as people transition between state and county, that they're not falling through the cracks. So, job number one for me has been working on policy, helping the things that we're doing in the legislative session right now. And then job number two for me, I've been on a bit of a listening tour so far that will continue a little bit on May 1st. But is really just looking for more of these opportunities. Are there other things that we're not seeing from a policy perspective, from a support perspective, that we can help from even just from an agency perspective, not legislatively too. So
what about from a workforce perspective? Because that's one thing that I hear, for instance, in the state hospital debate, we talk about, there was a debate at one point about, should we be so focused on building sort of a singular facility in Jamestown versus going to more regional facilities around the state. And one of the things that came up, I had a series of articles about the struggles some of our judges are having in just getting people into treatment to get them competent so that they can go through the criminal proceedings. Because obviously somebody who is so compromised either because of mental health or substance abuse that they can't participate in their own defense, they can't be put on trial. So that's a difficult thing. But it came up in that context was that even if we build these facilities, who are we going to get to work in them? Because North Dakota's our available workforce is practically zero. So in addition to all the other things, Jonathan, that are on your plate, North Dakota's long-standing workforce shortage has got to be a complicating factor here.
I would say no matter who you were talking to in which industry, they would say that, yes, it is. It's, workforce is an issue in the state. I will say, though, that we are taking steps to address that. I also serve on the Opioid Settlement Advisory Committee, and, that advises how we're using our opioid settlement dollars that are coming into the state. Our last go around, we had, grants that were given that directly impacted workforce, and we saw the benefits of that to get more licensed addiction counselors trained. The numbers actually spiked in terms of the number of licensed addiction counselors in the state that are going through training. So we are doing that. It's interesting you bring up workforce, though, because another piece of workforce that could use our help, and that are people that are reentering society from the criminal justice system. If you heard my testimony during these bills at Senate Judiciary, I gave examples, being a small business owner myself, of having to drive people that just got out of jail to the driver's license office to get them a state ID just so I could legally start their employment journey with me.
I've done that.
Yeah,
I managed a retail store in Minot for a while, and I would give, it was entry-level type jobs, and we were hiring people, and I was giving people, I was so it was at the height of the oil boom too in Minot, and I was driving people to appointments so that they could get what they needed, so that eventually I could have somebody who would show up for work.
Yeah. So, we're ultimately talking about thousands of people in the state here that have a better chance of being gainfully employed and staying successfully employed. If 1549 passes and we can, put it into law. So I think that's an important part of the workforce discussion as well.
I think it really is. Jonathan, thank you so much for your time and coming on and telling us about it. Once again, the bill numbers are 1549, 1417, and 1425. They're all sponsored by State Representative Larry Clemene out of Bismarck. Bills to watch. This is an important thing to watch. And again, I think it's something that flies under our radar. And what I always like to say when we talk about these criminal justice issues is that most of us aren't going to experience the criminal justice system from the inside. Most of us may not even have a family member who does, but a lot of people do. And you don't know how important this stuff is until you have a cousin or a daughter or a spouse or somebody you love, somebody you're close to go through this. And you don't understand how important it is, I think, to put flexibility, and really empower the people who are acting in good faith, or judges or prosecutors, defense attorneys, everybody else. Give them the tools, give them the flexibility, give them the options to really find the right path through this, and to ultimately get somebody back to where they can, just live a life and have a job and have a family and friends and be prosperous. That's what we want.
And what you just said applies to substance use disorder too, not just the criminal justice system. It's, you could copy and paste that right into that statement, and it's the same effect, Rob.
Or a lot of overlap.
Right.
Right. Jonathan, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Jonathan. Keep up the good work.
Thanks, guys.